Nice. So we are live, and I see people flowing into the session. Hello, everyone. Let's just wait while we have some static number. I see. Okay, the people still increasing to the hey, everyone. So our next session will be regarding a topic which is in news these days because of a certain update made by Kubernetes. And the people who follow Kubernetes and Docker and the entire container domain, they understand how big it is and how important it is for their lives, right? So here we have Nabrun Pal. Nabrun will be talking about Kubernetes. The topic will be let's get serious about Kubernetes. Kubernetes has taken the world by a storm. Everyone is interested in using Kubernetes to deploy their applications. It takes a lot of careful consideration when designing your application. The talk takes you through a journey of the best practices of deploying Python application on Kubernetes. Nabrun, the stage is all yours.
Hi everyone. Am I audible? Fine.
Yeah, audible.
Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Nabarun. So before I start with the slides and everything, just wanted to give you a brief rundown of what is going to happen in the next 1 hour. So 1 hour is pretty less to understand some paradigms of Kubernetes, but I'll try my best to actually cover some important things that people usually uh, miss when deploying applications. Uh, it's great to be here. I'll just share my screen in a moment. Before that, I'll just share some instructions. Uh, if you have not seen my Zulip message, you can. I'll just paste the same thing here. So one of the first things is can you please, in the meanwhile, while I do my introductions and give you a brief primer, can you please go to the Minikube getting started site and the kubectl installation just to initiate the installation in the background so that we save on some time. Thanks. I'll just uh, get back to you in a moment.
While Nabarun is setting things up, you can see that we have certain descriptions on the chat, the Airmeet chat. And remember that you can ask any question after the session on Julep chat. So go through the description that Nabarun has pasted on the chat. And since it is going to be a hands-on session, and a lot of practical stuff will be thrown by Nabarun. So just to make sure that everything is ready and set up, please make sure that you have all these prerequisites, the requirements for the session, and I'm pretty sure it will be very smooth.
Well, thanks everyone for thanks Shashank for giving the introduction, and everyone for waiting for 2-3 minutes to get me started. So I'll start with some brief slides. Although I don't like slides much, I am more hands-on kind of person. So I like to fail with people, start failing things and then make progress. Going ahead. Who am I? I am Navarun. I work as an infrastructure engineer at Clarisites. Been into open source for around three and a half-ish years now. Over the years, I have contributed to a lot of Python projects, notably Matplotlib, and then went off into the Kubernetes ecosystem. I currently hold some positions in the community. And will be the release lead for the next Kubernetes release cycle, which is 1.21. This will begin in January. I also do teach and mentor students to write better FOSS software. I do it as part of the DGPLUG summer training. Please feel free to hop in anytime on IRC, hashtag DGPLUG. Where can you find me on the web? I have a website called naba.ron. You can go there and see what I'm up to, or DM me on Twitter, or look at what I do on GitHub. Well, full disclosure, the title does look like clickbaitish. It is clickbaitish. The reason I put such title was that people usually ignore some nitty-gritties of deploying applications to Kubernetes. Just wanted to get more eyes into certain things, hence the title. Going ahead, who is this tutorial for? Number one, anyone who is, or engineers who are designing ephemeral applications. By ephemeral, I mean short-lived, or applications which can die anytime and can spin back up in milliseconds. This is also suited for Kubernetes administrators, people who administrate applications on Kubernetes. And lastly, anyone who is like curious to learn things. If you want to learn something, this is something about managing processes, because most of the advice that I give, the paradigms, will be applicable to any system management solution, even systemd. Because Kubernetes under the hood uses a container runtime, and then container runtime eventually boils down to something like a service manager, sometimes or most of the time systemd. Cool. So what is on the agenda today? So I'll talk about basically 5 things. Number one, managing configuration in your application. How do you pass configuration to your application? Number 2, health checks. How do you make sure your application is healthy? How can you tell Kubernetes that, hey, here are the things that you need to check on my application, so that you can reset the application if it is not healthy? Resource management. Resource management basically talks about what if you are memory leaking inside your application. What if you're taking way too much memory that even the engineers have not anticipated initially? Number 4, security contexts. Often people neglect the topic of security, in the sense that they run privileged containers. They run containers which can wreak havoc on your infrastructure. I personally believe too much in principles of least privileges, which I'll talk about later on in that section. And I'll show you how do you tell Kubernetes that, hey, here are the privileges that my application should only have. It should not have anything other than that. Number 5, graceful termination. What it talks about is your application should have actually a shutdown lifecycle. So let's say you are running a web server or something, and then you have some in-memory cache that you need to sync to your disk or your database. If I kill the application right away, that data may not be synced, and then this leads to data corruption. This is most likely will lead to corruption. How do you? So the topic is, how do you signal Kubernetes that, hey, can you please wait for certain period of time that I'll just flush the data to disk, and then you can kill me. That's all. So I just gave you a brief primer onto the agenda. I'll go ahead and start with explaining each thing one by one, and then I will show you some examples of how I do it. So it will be a demo based. That's why in the meanwhile, while I give the explanation, if you can install Minikube and kubectl, you can even try the examples on your own. Awesome. So let me go ahead. I'll just check for questions here. Okay. Shashank says, okay. So there are no questions as such now. Will I see? Okay. So Vivekananda Tadala asks, sorry if I get anyone's name wrong, please feel free to correct me. Vivekananda asks, can you suggest some good books for Kubernetes? Well, it depends on what you are looking for. If you are looking for something like operating clusters, or like what point of view are you looking at? Are you looking at from an application developer's point of view, Although I have the answers to your question just at the end of my slides, I think I have linked books. I'll come back to your question later on once more. Well, so I'm hoping that people who are attending this tutorial are fairly accustomed with Kubernetes, but giving just a small overview of how the architecture looks like. This is a very simplified architecture of Kubernetes. So let me get a pointer. Okay. So Kubernetes basically entails something which is called a control plane and something which is called like your node or your data plane, however you call it. Your control plane actually contains a server which listens to requests and then acts like a middleman or a coordinator between all other services. Uh, then you have your data store, which is etcd. It's just like a key value store, but which is highly distributed and resilient to failures. Then you have a controller manager. You can think of controller manager as a while true loop. It is basically a loop which is running, listening for changes on API server, and then whenever a change happens, it acts on that change and modifies some resource. Then you have the scheduler. So once controller manager uh, performs all the operations, whatever is needed on a resource, scheduler tries to look for any unscheduled workload. All what it does is it has a context of how many nodes are there in the system, and then it, based on some complicated algorithm, like usually simple, but majorly you can provide like any sort of logic to that. Based on some logic, it will assign a node out of those heuristics, and then it will persist the same data to the data store. What happens after that is this service kubelet is what listens for any workload that it is supposed to run based on a field, and then when it gets something to be run, it basically runs through the container runtime as a container, or like as a, so pods is basically an abstraction over containers. It's a cluster of containers. So think of 4 containers having the same network namespace, same file system namespace running uh, in the, like, as a cluster. uh, Now, as Shashank mentioned, there was some controversy regarding uh, Kubernetes deprecating Docker, but that's not the case. I'll tell you, people should not panic. Docker is here to stay. You can still run Docker images. Often the term Docker is highly misunderstood. Uh, it has been synonymous with containers, but which is not true. So Docker is just another container runtime. And Docker still does not support something called a CRI, Container Runtime Interface. Basically, to give you a context, Kubernetes supports a lot of container runtimes. So the community designed something called a Container Runtime Interface, basically a common set of functions that any container runtime should support so that Kubernetes can use it. Docker does not provide that interface, so the community created an interface, and then it is now becoming tough to manage. That's why that interface is deprecated, not Docker running Docker images. You can still run any container image which conforms to the specification. So nothing to worry about. I'll put it in the chat some links to a community blog and an FAQ of why you should not worry about it. So I'll go ahead now. Look if any Q&A came. No. Well, so I'll pause for around 2-3 minutes so that you can uh, download Minikube and then start a cluster. I'm monitoring the chat. If anyone is facing issues, let's solve it in the chat itself. Please let me know if you have any issues. Is anyone like facing any issues with installing Minikube? Can you have a raise of hands like who have set up Minikube already? Um, I can't actually see all the thumbs ups. Sorry. I'll start a vote to get more info actually. Okay, fair. Good voting is going on.
Now there's a section right after Q&A for the folks who have raised their hands. You can find it there.
Yeah, I actually saw someone raising hands and then like taking their hands down. So
Okay.
no worries. The vote thing is good. I can at least get the ratio of people who have done or not done. No worries, Kuntal. Okay, I'll show the next screen as well. You also need to install kubectl. I'll also paste the Windows instructions since I think there are some Windows users also. Uh, Give me a moment. So, in the meanwhile, when people are installing, I will start giving introductions on the section. Uh, so, firstly, I talked about like configuration management. What do you mean by configuration management? It can be anything related to uh, where your application needs tunables, like which port to run on, should it run in debug mode, what host should it listen to, uh, things like what is the database URL, things like what is the database password, username, basically any sort of DSN information, all those kind of things. Uh, One of the directives that is really missing from most things is like configuration should usually not reside with code. When configuration resides with code, it becomes really difficult to actually provision different environments and based on that to change the behavior of applications. So you should really not store config variables as constants. They should ideally be read from the environment variables, or another way is like environment files. But then the framework or the web server or whatever process that you are running has to have an understanding of environment files. One of the big benefits of environment variables is that they are very easy to configure, they are orthogonal in nature, and then they can be easily switched out. And they work really well with the Linux process model, as in if you run a process, you can specify uh, like key value pairs as environment variables, and then inside your application, inside your code, you can basically get it from env. You can use os.getEnv, specify the key to get the value of the variable that you want. So having said that, I will share with you my terminal and show you an application. Okay, can everyone see that? I hope they can. uh, so what I mean by that is, one of the paradigms that you can do is basically hard code everything like this. The problem with that is, will debug be true in your production environment? Mostly no. It's certainly no. The answer should be certainly no. You should never run things like this on your production environment.
Sorry to interrupt, Navin, but we don't see the terminal. We actually see the Chrome window right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
just a moment. Uh, I was sharing my code editor. Can you see it now?
Yep, all good.
Okay, cool. I'll probably increase the font size a bit. Okay, is it fine now? Can everyone see it? If someone can act it, yeah, cool. So if you see here, right, you'll see this is a simple Flask application doing lots of unoptimized things. Just to give you examples of how to write those paradigms in Kubernetes. So I'm just running the application and saying that, hey, the host should be the exposed loopback thing, 0.0.0, and then it should run on port 8080, and debug should be true for the Flask web server. But usually, in things like in environments like production, you should never set debug is equal to true. This exposes you to a lot of vulnerabilities and surface vectors of attack. So you see how this application is bad, right? Even if I run it in production, it will still run in debug true. What you should ideally do is do something like this: manage configuration using environment variables. So you set it somehow in the environment, and then you use os.getEnv specifying the name of the variable. Obviously, you should also set a sane default. Sane defaults for debug is false. So even if I don't pass anything, it will run in a like good manner. Debug will not be on. What if I want to change debug mode? I'll just set debug is equal to true and then run the application. To give you a small example of how this works, uh, since sharing my whole screen is not working, I am just switching between sharing modes. Well, can you see? Yeah, you can see my terminal. So this is basically the application. Now, if I want to run this application, I can just do Python app.py. Well, bound to happen. And debug mode is on by default, which is sad because I don't want debug to be on. So what I'll go ahead and change it to read from the variable that I defined above. While I am doing it, let me write it the correct way itself. Host is equal to host, port is equal to port, debug is equal to debug. Fair. Now let me run it. Ooh, it is still running. Debug mode is equal to on. And Okay, thank you, Murphy's Law. Best way to debug, isn't it? Print statements. Oopsie, I'm getting true. Uh, can anyone point me out what is happening? Shashank, if you're saying something, you're muted.
Sorry. Can you share your editor? We can't see your editor, so we can't like figure out what's happening with the code.
Actually, the problem is with my window manager. I shared my whole screen, but apparently it was not switching. Now, okay. Now can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm doing os.getEnv debug. If nothing is found, then bool false, and then print debug.
Sandeep has a suggestion, or rather a question. He asks, "How do you get autocomplete functionality in the terminal?" Oh, that's a separate thing.
That's I'll answer it later on. After
So
we'll chat later.
yeah, and another thing that I guess he suggests that you may want to export the environment variable after seeing it.
I think okay. I know what you're talking about. Okay, let me try this. I never tried opening terminal in my code editor, but okay, cool. So I think what you're suggesting is do export debug is equal to false, and then do python app.py, right? The variable is already set in the terminal, so that's why it is being set to true in the same session. Maybe the case, but then you saw this, right? Export debug is equal to false. So it's an issue with this. Basically, what you should do is, let me so I thought people would like os.getEnv default is false, string it should be boolean, just a bool in the beginning. Yes, Sadeep, that was kind of the issue. So if you bool a string, it does get it to true. But then I tested it before. But again, Murphy bites you back. But then let's go ahead. So now you see one of the paradigms how you should configure your application. So let's go ahead and see how can you do it in Kubernetes. So I have a very simple setup for Kubernetes. I show you the tree manifests. So I like to shard out my configuration based on the environment and then have some shared config. So I'll give you a brief of how the deployment is structured out. And here I am running under this assumption that people have context of what is a deployment, what is a config map, and what is a service. Uh, so if I show you the deploy, so if you see the deployment, it is basically running a Docker image of this application. I just named it bad app because it's a bad application. And then if you see, I am getting all the environment from this config map. So config map is basically, you can think of as a key value pair or a dictionary in Python, which Kubernetes understands. It is just another resource type for Kubernetes. So what I'm saying, the Kubernetes runtime here is that, hey, all the environment variables that you will inject into the pod, take it from a config map whose name is bad app config. Now, what does that config map contain? I have separated it out by environments because different environments have different config variables. Just like I explained, the difference where the debug flag is different based on environments. In dev, you ideally would have debug is equal to true, but then in production you won't have debug is equal to true. You would have debug is equal to false, which is reflected here. So a config map looks like this. You have key and value, key and value, and key and value pairs, and they will be there in the container at runtime. So let me see if I have deployed this already. If not, I'll delete it. Okay, let me start with a fresh. Oops. Oh, I did not deploy this one. Bad app. Sorry, my bad. So I'll deploy everything. So let's all of the resources so that we can see how the environment variables are populated. So I have applied the config map. Now I'll apply the actual workload. I'll come to what a service is. It's just I've created to debug things. Service is basically a routing logic. It creates a DNS name in Kubernetes, all that things. So let me see if it is running. Okay. Cool, it is running. So let me go into the pod. kubectl exec -it, then bad app. Let's run bash inside it. I don't know if it has bash. Oh, it has bash. So the command env on your machine lists out all the environment variables that are in the current process's context. So if you see, all of this have been populated. Ignore the other things. They are populated by Kubernetes. There are some control variables that Kubernetes wants each container or pod to have. So if you see, debug is equal to false. Okay. Then I set host is also. Host is equal to 0.0.0. And then port as well, which is 8080. All other things are irrelevant for our situation right now. And if I see the logs, I am not expected to see a production container or a production web server. But well, since it's a badly behaving app, it's still debug mode is equal to on. And the problem here was, after changing the code, I did not build the image and push it. Bad. So meanwhile, it builds the image. Okay, it would be done really soon. I'll take some questions. the next 2-3 minutes. I saw someone had raised hands. Do you want to come to the screen? Okay, I guess no. Cool. So it has been pushed. Let me delete and apply again. The new application is creating. I'm just checking whether it pulled the correct image. 19804. It did not. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's do the correct practice and then just tag it with something. Okay, so apparently we have the correct one now. Yeah, so as you see, I have now controlled it to have debug mode is equal to off. Now to explain you the power of how things can be really dynamic, I'll show you how just changing the config map will change the mode of your application. Obviously you have to restart the application because a process, or you have to handle it inside the application that hey, keep on updating things, and then once you see a change, then you restart by yourself. In this case we wrote a really dumb application, so it does not have those fancy things. So now if I see, I showed you that debug environments config map, right? Let me apply that, or the dev environments, sorry. So now if we get this config map, bad app config, let's look at it very generously. You see that debug is equal to true now. So let me delete all the existing pods, sorry. Okay, it is taking some time. In the meanwhile, let's see what is the status. Okay, so the earlier one is being terminated. Let me see the logs of the new one. Ideally, what we wanted was that we change the debug flag from false to true. So now Flask should be running in the debug mode, right? Voila, here we go. So you saw that without even changing the code, I changed the uh, behavior of the application. It is just changing the behavior and not the logic. So as you see, this is a really robust mechanism to actually do things. Uh, Instead, I'll also tell you, I did an env from, right? This takes env from things like config map or secrets, which are already defined. What if I want to do it from this from this manifest itself? What I can do is set env, which is a list of this name and value pairs, name foo, value bar. So when you specify like this, and if I apply this configuration, I can see that it will also populate this foo is equal to bar. Uh, in the interest of time, I'm just skipping showing you this, but it does work like as it is expected to. If anyone wants me to show it later on, I can, like, I'll be there on the lounge to talk about things in this tutorial, so we can discuss there. Cool. So okay, there are some questions. We had a problem. If we had issue in config map, each time we had to redeploy the app. Priyabrata asked this even when our app was configured to dynamically handle from environment variable. Is there any way to dynamically change config map? The config map changes dynamically. I think the part that you are facing problem is actually populating the same in the containers. That would be the problem. So if you, yes, so you anyways need to do a rollout of your deployment. You don't need to delete. Like there are ways of rolling out changes to your application. So in the sense, it's so if you see what is a container, it's an image plus some runtime variables, right? Image is not changed, but the runtime variables have changed. So the container has to be somehow signaled that, hey, I have to restart. So what you can do is that Kubernetes provides this abstraction called deployment, right? As I showed you. You can do a rollout of the deployment. What it will do is still preserve the older workloads, but like start newer workloads. And then once they're started completely, you delete the older ones. Not you, but Kubernetes does it for you. What are the benefits of doing this, Song and Dance? Is that your traffic will still be intact. So your customer traffic is anyway not impacted to that. Does that kind of answer your question, Priyabrata? Or handle it app level using Zookeeper, like Zookeeper or etcd? Yes. So obviously, if you don't want to use environment variables, you want to have some persisted data store somewhere else, you have Zookeeper, etcd, or why not PG? Use Postgres, have a table called configuration, then read from that configuration, and your app can internally refresh things at certain intervals. So yep, let me go ahead. We just have 20 minutes left, which is like really short. I'll share my slides again. Just a moment. Cool. Coming on to the next thing. I hope I am able to explain this in a verbose fashion. So going ahead, the next thing is we have health checks. So if you see an application, right, if you see a long running application, it will do some operations. Let's take for a web server. It will listen to requests. It will perform actions. It will like return responses to that, get things from database. The problem with all those operations is you have dependency on other services, right? You will read from a database. What if the database is returning to you data slowly? What if there is a deadlock in your application? All of these things can lead to application failures. And then a lot of the times applications are not designed well, that they will fail as soon as these issues occur. So you need to have some way of checking its health By health, I mean no deadlocks or backings. You are talking to your databases or cache efficiently. You are able to connect to them and you are able to fetch data. And all of these things need to happen. One of the benefits when you do life cycle health checks or life cycle management is that your dependencies know that you are not available for, let's say, you have 10 web servers running in your fleet of workloads. If one of them goes into deadlock, it should ideally not get any traffic, right? Because it can't respond back. In Kubernetes, what happens is you have three kinds of health checks or probes. One is readiness probe, the other one is liveness probe, and the third one, which is fairly new, it's still kind of in beta, which is called startup probe. If you're using a vendored Kubernetes from the big cloud providers, probably it is not yet shipped there, but liveness and readiness probes are still there. What I mean by readiness probe is that when your application starts and it is doing some operations and it is not yet to listen to traffic, readiness probes ensure that you are not getting traffic to that workload, to that particular process until things are settled down. And then, hey, I have contacted the DB, I have warmed my cache, all of those things. I'm just giving examples of things you can do. And then liveness checks are basically checks throughout the life cycle, not just at the start, to see whether you are even capable of responding to requests. So that's all the hula hula around health checks. I gave you the Kubernetes equivalents. There is a cool thing called Watchdog. You can have a look at Systemd. Systemd also supports having probes like this, which is kind of very beneficial. So once your application supports this kind of probes, any of your service managers can actually leverage them. So let's go to the Kubernetes world back. I'll do the song and dance of changing my share again. Okay, cool. So now you already saw a glimpse because I wrote everything in the same manifest. So if you see, I defined, sorry, I'm just not, I just don't want to give a sneak peek of next stuff. So I defined a readiness probe and then I told Kubernetes that, hey, this probe is of type HTTP and I should do a GET request. There are other kinds of probes, like there is a TCP probe and there is another probe called exec probe. So if I do exec probe, if I do an exec probe, I can basically specify any command. The syntax may not be correct. I'm just thinking through my mind. I can do like echo some file or do a test on if a file exists, like a PID file. So these are kind of probes that you have. And then what I'm specifying here is that, hey, can you ping the endpoint /ready on localhost on port 8080? That is where my application is running, right? I set the port to 8080. Now there are some configuration parameters to all kinds of probes. What is your initial delay? So you may have an idea that on every runtime of your application, for this amount of time, this endpoint is not ready to it. I know that it will certainly fail. That you can specify here as an initial delay. And then you can specify at what cadence, like how many seconds should be the loop delay for your readiness probe check. Then you can specify the timeout, you can specify the success and failure thresholds. So what they mean is there should be at least one successful probe to set the status as ready, and to set the status to not ready, you should ideally consecutively fail 3 probe tests. Same with liveness probes, it gives you the same semantics, just that readiness readiness probes defines the behavior of traffic, as in when you're not ready, Kubernetes will not send you traffic. That's where the magic of services come into picture. So I told you, right, about a service manifest that I applied. So it basically redirects traffic to every pod which has this selector, basically app is equal to bad app, which I wrote here. Okay. Now what happens is, if any of the pods which are not ready, Kubernetes does not route requests to them, which is what we were targeting to do. Cool. So I'll show you a demonstration of how this thing is working. I also have a debug container to show you like some operations from inside the cluster. How does it look? Okay, so if I do, let me delete the pod just so that I have a fresh slate. It has been running for 11 minutes, right? Okay, so I have a fresh pod. You see, it is not yet ready. Why is it so? I can do a describe. So using describe on any Kubernetes resource, you get the events as well, along with all the other metadata. So you see this, right? Kubelet is actually trying to perform some probes. First, it did the probe, and then it says connection refused. My application is not ready yet. It is also doing the liveness probe, and got, obviously, since it is not ready, my application is not live as well at the same time. Then if you see, when I do ready, context deadline exited, client timeout exceeded while awaiting headers. So it still failed, and then it's still failing. Now you saw that it tried for 4 times over 54 seconds, and this probe got failed. But now it's in ready state. So you see the timeline of events, right? I don't know why it is not doing the healthy status. Probably there is something wrong with my Kubernetes cluster. Some configuration I might have done so that I'm not getting the healthy thing. But usually what happens is you should also get one event that after failures, something is passing back again. But one other signal, how I know it is ready, is the conditions. So I know that the container is ready, and it is also ready for getting traffic, which it was not earlier when I started and just did a describe. Fair. Now you might wonder, what did I do in my code to deserve such behavior, right? Let me show you. So I have a readiness endpoint, which just is very stupid and then returns 200. Okay, if it has started up, it has started at least readiness delay number of seconds before. What did I set it to? 5. So my application needs to be at least running for 5 seconds that I'm getting the 200. Okay, it is just a dumb situation of showing you a readiness probe. Ideally, what you should do is, suppose you have a database, and let's say this is the database connector. You should do, I'm just giving you my suggestions. I'll just do a select one on the database. This will at least give me a guarantee that the database is listening to queries and then returning me back the data. If this thing fails, obviously I'm not getting a 200 okay exit code unless you do some try catch and then override things. So this is the benefit of your readiness probe. Now coming to liveness probe, it is also a simple thing. So I have something called a response delay, and I have a way of increasing the delay. I can query the time leak endpoint, and then the probe will be delayed by 0.5 seconds. Remember what I said in the liveness probe? It is its timeout is like 2 seconds. So delay, if this delay goes over 2 seconds, my uh, request would timeout, and hence Kubernetes would tell that hey, it is not live. So what will happen in that case? Let's go to the terminal and see. Uh, okay, I'm just looking for questions if anyone has a question. Nope. So let me put a watch on this. We will monitor that what happens to this bad app resource. I'm going to the other shell, and then I'll open the debug container. Okay, so I can curl. This is my endpoint. So you can see that it is ready. Response delay is 0 second for now. Let me response delay has increased. Let me increase it more to something insane. It is now 2.5 seconds. So somewhere down the line, I'll see an event where it will basically delete this pod because it is not live anymore. You see? So this restarted. So what did Kubernetes see here? Kubernetes saw that, well, events are to my rescue, that liveness probes failed 2 times in the last 7 seconds. Wait a moment. Is this the same container? Okay. So what Kubernetes did was basically it saw that, hey, the container is not live, and I was instructed to restart the container because it's a liveness probe once my checks fail for a certain threshold. So I did the change. So that's where the value comes in. Okay, so I see that I have just 6 minutes left. I'll just quickly transfer over to the health checks, the next thing, which is resource management. So I'll do a speed run here. We will talk in detail. I guess I can be in the lounge and talk to people about this session. So we can chat over there after this. But I'll give you some context about the other things that I was mentioning in the agenda was that resource management. So sometimes your application can actually leak resources. Memory leaks can happen. Your GC may be inefficient in actually cleaning up objects if you're using a GC based language to design your applications. And due to this misbehavior or usage of extra memory, your other applications can actually misbehave. They may suffer. They may be killed. So Kubernetes provides a QoS mechanism through its request, resource, and limits to actually detect for such instances and then take some action. So Kubernetes can kill pods if they take more than a certain amount of memory, if you specify that limit. Otherwise, Kubernetes does nothing by default. You have to specify them. I'll come to examples later on now for this. The next thing, what you should do is you should handle graceful termination using signals. So when Kubernetes, you should do it even not running in a Kubernetes environment. It should happen everywhere. So when you kill a pod in Kubernetes or you try to kill a workload, Kubernetes actually sends using kubelet a sig term signal to the application, and then ideally you should handle the termination signal. Why you should do that is because let's say you are I told you about that situation, right? You might have a cache where you are doing writes also. So, and that writes may not persist to the DB. What if you want to persist the same to the DB? You can do all those things in between that timeout. By default, what Kubernetes does is once you send a sig term, it waits for 60 seconds before sending a sick kill, which means end of the process. Sorry, boss, you can't do anything. And in addition to that, there's something called a pre-stop hook as well. What this hook does is, even before sending a sick term, you can run specific operations. Let's say you have Nginx, right? If you send a sick term to Nginx, it can shut down correctly, but then Nginx has another command called I think quit. So just like reload, which you can do on SIG-hub, you can on sick term do a quit. So you can do Nginx minus s quit, which will safely tell Kubernetes that Nginx that you should shut down. So that's how you can handle signals. The last important point here is security contexts. So when you are running applications in containers, often it is overlooked that you are running everything on privileged containers. You are running as root, unless the runtime that you are using has some inherent checks and balances to prevent you to do that. So let's say you are using a runtime which does not have those checks and balances. Kubernetes provides you with something called a security context. There you can define that, hey, run as this user, hey, run as this group, hey, any mounted volume, can you mount it as this group ID? All those is fine. Then in the last release, Kubernetes introduced in general availability, which is SecComp. SecComp is a very popular concept, not related to Kubernetes, but it was implemented in Kubernetes eventually. You can basically filter any of your workload syscalls. So let's say you don't want someone to have netadmin privileges, you can just block that thing, or you don't want someone to open a file descriptor. Kind of very corner case, but then just giving an example. So having said that, where do you read more about these things? You can go to kubernetes.io/docs/concepts. You can get hands-on with tasks. Kubernetes has some beautiful verbose, like imperative things that you can do, like do this, do that, do this, do that, and you can basically achieve something. You can try to understand the Kubernetes architecture by reading over the design proposals and enhancements. They basically contain all of the changes that are done to Kubernetes. Basically, to give you an analogy, KEPs are PEPs in the Kubernetes world. Just like Python enhancement proposals, Kubernetes has Kubernetes enhancements proposals. Coming to the question, what books should you read? So there are two books which are Kubernetes Up and Running by Kelsey Hightower. Highly suggested book if you want to start exploring Kubernetes. It has concepts from the base logic. You can also read it Kubernetes Patterns, but you should read this after Kubernetes Up and Running so that you have more context about Kubernetes. Patterns gives you some paradigms, just like I described. You can also see paradigms like how do you run jobs, how do you run singleton processes, how do you run daemons in Kubernetes. And then if you are really like hands-on like me, you can do this awesome tutorial by Kelsey again called Kubernetes the Hard Way. It basically goes through a journey of actually deploying Kubernetes by hand, not just application, but Kubernetes. It is a highly useful resource for people who wear the admin hat. Lastly, Shashank, I know you are unmuted, so just last slides. So if you have any questions, in addition to the usual channels, I am available on Twitter as the only Nabarun, or Nabarun on Freenode. You can just ping me there, or you can drop me a mail at hey@nabarun. I'll share the slides on the Zlib chat as well, and somewhere in the event streams as well. Having said that, I'm really sorry that I could not cover the other three demonstrations, but I really wanted to share them. So I'll be in the table 8, just giving you a number so that we're not random. So in the lounge, table 8, if you want to chat with me, you can come there. So
Great.
thank you all and have a nice day.
Thanks a lot, Navrun, and Thanks a lot. And for the folks who want more information regarding this, feel free to go on Zulip as well. Even if you're not able to go on lounge area, feel free to go on Zulip. Navron will be present. So that's a more async way of communication, And you have other options as well of Zulip like Twitter. Thanks a lot, Navron. That was great. I hope we all learned something today. And I'll be hoping to get the link to the slides as well on Zulip, right?
Sure. Yeah, I usually like upload all my slides to a central location. So
Okay.
I'll also share the slides and the code is already there. I'll share the link to the repo, and I'll also update the code which is there.
Great, great. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in.
Thanks
Thank you.
everyone. Do join Table 8 if you want to talk.
Take care,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye. Yeah.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah.